I'm going to welcome you again and say welcome to Journeys in Music. Today we have, Adrian, I don't know how to say your last name.
Casas.
Your last name, Casas? Okay.
Casas.
So we have Adrian Casas with us. That's the L part that I was worried about.
Oh yeah, don't worry about that one.
Okay. Okay, good. So Adrian Casas is with us today. As we get started today, I just want to acknowledge that we are not the first people to ever make music in this place. The music that the Conservatory primarily performs is Western European music, but our Indigenous brothers and sisters have been making music and living in this place for thousands and thousands of years before our ancestors got here. The University of Regina is situated on the territories of the Naheabok, the Anishinaabe, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota, and the homeland of the Métis-Michif Nation. We have the University of Regina is on Treaty 4 lands with a presence also in Treaty 6. And so welcome you here today. I don't know if we're all on Treaty 4 and Treaty 6 land. We might be on other treaty lands too, because we're on Zoom, so we could be anywhere actually. But I am pleased to have Adrian with us. He is the conductor of the Regina Community Orchestra, and he is also very active as a musician in Regina and Mexico. And I'm going to ask Adrian, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do these days?
All right. So my name is Adrian Casas. I am a violinist and conductor. I live here in Regina. As Christa said, I am the conductor of the Regina Community Orchestra. I also serve as assistant conductor for the University of Regina Orchestra, and as of last March, I was interim conductor of that orchestra as well. And I'm a freelance violin player, and yeah, that's pretty much about me.
That's all. That's all. Yeah, it's a long list, Adrian. Okay, so so what I have discovered over the last 3 or 4 months of talking to musicians is that we don't always have a playlist. But do you have, like, what do you listen to when you're not playing music?
And I'm not playing music. Okay. I have, and actually I wrote it down because I haven't done a playlist for a long time, because now with the beautiful technology that we have, you just buy a subscription and you can pick anything, anytime, anywhere, right? So, but I do have a nice. I discovered this album recently. It's the composer Oliver Davis, who, modernist composer, but it's not that avant-garde modernist. Is actually very, very pleasant to listen to. And with the Budapest Symphony, and I'm fascinated with that album because he basically collaborated with a bunch of musicians all over the world. It was recorded in the mid of the pandemic last year, and he collaborated remotely with artists from different parts of the world, and then he just made a mix, and then he hired the Budapest Symphony Orchestra, and then produced the album, and so it's the process that I'm fascinated. I mean, the music, I love the music, of course, but it's the process that I'm fascinated about, and it's something that I've been forced in a good way to do it because of the pandemic as well, right? Like with the community orchestra, we just wrapped up last week, and we were doing pretty much a virtual orchestra throughout the pandemic. And one of the last exercises I asked them to do was to send me a recording of a piece, and then I am in the post-production stage right now, where I'm mixing all the little bits, and of course, and my background is not in academic, like it's not in recording, anything like that. I do have a recording certificate, like a music production certificate, but it's not advanced enough to, like, get it on the spot right away. Within an hour I'll get the mix done and then send it over. I still working on the little bits here and there, and it's taking me to relearn the whole process again. And so that's why I'm fascinated with that album. For surprisingly, and you will be very surprised about this one, if you look at my suggested songs and my suggested playlist in my Apple Music and whatever subscription, you will see a lot of metal and a lot of hard rock.
Really?
Yeah.
That is surprising.
Yeah. And I do enjoy, particularly metal. I do enjoy it, and I see a lot of parallels with classical music, particularly with like structures and textures and all that kind of stuff. And I know a bunch of people will disagree with me, and that's fine. That's totally okay. But and the only reason why I have metal, I don't consume it for pleasure. One of my hobbies is working out, and I don't look like I work out, but I work out. And one of my hobbies is working out, and when I work out, the only way to get me excited and pumped is with hard rock and classic rock and metal. And yeah, it's the only way to get me going. Pop and rap and R&B and all of that don't do the trick. It has to be like really hard metal.
Okay, so what's your favorite pump you up kind of workout song? Do you have a favorite?
Chop Suey probably will be the.
Which one?
Let me find it. See, the issue is that I don't consume it, so I don't remember the names.
Sorry.
But see, you put me on the spot. No, just kidding.
I did.
It's Chop Suey. It's actually quite famous, and it's kind of an oldie now. It's from the 2000s, which now is an oldie.
Yeah.
How is it called? Is it Chop Suey? I don't remember. It's quite famous, but.
That's okay. It's good.
Yeah. It's I like that one, but again, I just put like metal, essential metal playlist, and it just goes. And
there you go.
I start working out or running or whatever. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going. Okay, that's awesome. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And yeah. Okay, so now I have a tendency to start with this massive question, which is, what does music mean to you? And I apologize that it's such a big question, but I'm just gonna throw it out there and let you take it wherever you take it.
Okay.
Like how does music fit into your life, or how do you see it fitting into the world? However you want to answer that question.
All right, it is a hard question. It's a loaded question because it's a mystery. It's a mystery for me. Music. And the answer has changed for me, it has changed over the years, but music is essential to life, but it's not tangible. And you can put it as you can say, well, it's communication, but it goes beyond that. And then I keep circling back to a very practical question, very practical answer, and it's just our brain is too big. Like our brain is just too big, and it needs some sort of a stimulation to continue functioning. Like if you isolate someone from music, from listening to music, they will make music. They will drum on something, or they will sing, or they will hum, or whatever. And if you prohibit the individual to do that, they will probably lose their mind, right? And so that part of music I find fascinating, because you cannot live without it, and nobody can live without it. It's not. I mean, think of like sounds for animals and whatnot. They might be capable of enjoying music. They might be capable of like, I used to have a parrot when I was little, and we put music and they will bob their head, and they will imitate the sounds and sing as well, and all that kind of stuff. But they sounds are mostly is like survival mode, right? Like they detect sounds to see, if they can eat, they can fly, they can whatever, right? But for us individuals, we cannot go throughout a day without listening to music, listening to the radio, singing, drumming, doing something with music, right? Music doesn't give you the amino acids and the essential nutrients of life that you need to do, but will make music taste much better, right? And it's just like, how does that work? And I've been reading. There is this wonderful book, James Lewton. This is Your Brain in Music. Famous book, and he just explains wonderfully how it works there. But still, still we don't know how music is so essential for our brain. But if you take it away, we cannot survive. A wonderful experience that I had with the community orchestra. And a nurse told me, so our community orchestra plays for individuals that have no ability to get to a concert. So, like care homes, care centers. And one of our favorite locations is the rehab center right here in Wisconsin. And one of the nurses, we were one of our writing process is Sound of Music. And a nurse, we played, everything went well. We had a wonderful experience. And then a nurse approached me and said, like, you know what? There was this patient with Alzheimer, with memory loss or something like that, or some sort of issue that they were treating there. He was not able to move, and he hasn't spoken for 6 months or whatever. And the moment we played Sound of Music, he started to sing along with us. Yeah. And it was just a wonderful experience. And so that, and there is a lot of studies out there on how, like, people with dementia, people with Alzheimer's, you put the music that triggers memories, and then they start to recover those cognitive abilities, but we still figuring out how everything works, and so that's why it's a mystery for me, but I could not live without it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's all. I've had similar experiences in long-term care places with people with like singing hymns. Just because I've been in a lot of church services in long-term care spaces, and there are people who won't. Yeah, you're right. The music connects with them much more than the spoken word. Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so how I'm gonna go maybe back a little farther and say, so you are a violinist. How did you get started playing violin?
Oh, it's a long story.
Okay.
It's the longest story. So the shortest story, too late. The shortest story is my parents could not I wanted to be a pianist. My parents could not afford a piano, and there was a cheap violin on sale in back there wasn't Kijiji or anything like that. There, like in my neighborhood, there was one of those bulletin boards, and there was a violin on sale, and I told my dad, well, can I buy this crappy violin and getting violin lessons before and save up for a piano? And reluctantly, because he was always reluctant about my music education, he's like, yeah, sure, go ahead. He was thinking it's not going to last, it's a phase, whatever, right? And 20 years later, here I am. Never save up for the piano, and stayed with violin. But it actually, the story goes, it's a bit more complicated than that. The reason one of the main reasons I'm a violinist is because it got to I'm very stubborn and very I'm a late bloomer. I didn't start music until until I was 12 years old, and I started to teach. I started to teach myself how to play piano with a little, those Yamaha keyboards.
Yeah.
And it was all self-taught, and I bought as many books as I can, piano methods and theory and all that kind of stuff that I could get my hands on. And I did it, but obviously they only get you so far, right? Like those little Yamaha keyboards, they only get you so far. So that's when I asked my dad, and then I approached a piano teacher, and they were very like, no, you need a piano to practice at home. Like, okay. So I then the story of the violin. I bought a violin and yada yada yada. And then when I was studying violin, many people, except for my violin teacher, surprisingly, but many people told me, you know what, you won't make it as a violin. You won't. Don't even try it. You're too late. If you didn't start when you were 5, that's it. Don't even try it. So that dropped me in the wrong way, and that has always rubbed me in the wrong way. And I wasn't born in the guild. I wasn't born in a musician guild or in an artistic family. My parents were working class, blue collar family. Very typical. My dad was like, do college, do a formal education, like a lawyer or a doctor or whatever, and then after that you can do whatever you want. Like, well, no, Dad, it doesn't work that way. I'm actually 10 years behind, and I need to catch up. So yeah, everybody kept telling me, don't even try violin, do something else, because it's and that just infuriated me to the point that I'm like, okay, I'm going to become a violinist, and I'm going to show you that I can play violin even when I am ill. And I wish I wasn't that stubborn, because man, it was hard. And it's still really hard to and I practice, pardon my language, I practice my butt off almost every, not as much as I used to when I was a student, but I still practice every day, or as many as often as I can. Obviously, as an adult, things change, and you can't dedicate as much, but even I practice hard every day. And the journey was tricked again, because I wasn't born in the guild. Particularly my father, but my parents were they were supportive at the beginning, thinking, well, it's cute, it's a phase. And then when I said, like, this is what I want to do, they're like, no, you should do, very, very against it. And I was a well-behaved child, but I wasn't submissive. So if they told me, no, don't do that, then like, why can't I do it? Why? And I'll go on forever. And I tried voice lessons, and I was very into opera for a long time. And I was doing well. I was, and everybody kept telling me, go voice, try voice and become a singer. You're doing well, and all that kind of stuff. And that was, surprisingly, that was scary, because it wasn't that challenging. It was actually very comfortable. And I had the doors open, and my brain went like, what about if something goes wrong? What about if I lose my, and I've heard stories. I've heard so many stories. So like, what about if something goes wrong? And what about if I lose my voice, and then that's it? That's the end of my career. And of course, I was younger. I didn't know that you could have other paths into the career and whatnot. Like, what about if I lose my voice? And so I didn't continue in voice. I continued, I did my, I continued piano on my own, and then I continued violin all the way up until here in Regina. Then I started conducting after that. And
okay, so the conducting started here.
Yeah, I did take like open workshops and open master classes when I was studying in Mexico. But it wasn't that formal. It was just like, the casual classes here and there. And they were like good conductors, but I didn't I didn't get into formally into conducting after I came to Regina.
So what brought you to Regina?
Surprisingly, my violin teachers were very, very supportive, even though they were still on that idea of like, well, it's too late, but I don't want to be the bad guy who doesn't support you. So they were very supportive, and my violin teacher had connections with Edminovich back then, 2003, and had connections with Edminovich, and knew that the conservatory was doing a string workshop. So he, my violin teacher, and Edminovich organized so that at that time 9 violin players from Mexico came and visited Regina.
Oh wow!
That was a while ago, and then from then on, Edminovich was like, yeah, why don't you just come and study here? And a lot of factors in Mexico, like, because same sad story, like I wasn't born in the guild, so I didn't see any chances of doing something productive with music. And a lot of my colleagues were kind of in the same boat down there, in terms of like, once you graduate from the conservatory, then you might play in bars. If you get an audition in an orchestra, great, but if you don't have you're not a family or know someone or not have the connections, you probably won't get it. So you might end up playing in bars, tangos, which I did as a student actually a lot, playing tangos in bars and restaurants, and then that's it. So I didn't see anything productive out of that. So I'm like, yeah, might as well move. And then I ended up here in Regina, and Edminovich was my gateway to Regina.
Wow. Okay. So you studied at a conservatory in Mexico, is that right?
Correct.
And then you came here and you studied at the U of R as well. I know you said you started conducting here. Were you still studying violin when you came here as well?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So I started my bachelor's in music performance here. It was all in violin, and part of the bachelor's is they offer conducting classes, right? And music normally is geared for music education students who are going to conduct in front of a band when they go and go to the real world. But I'm like, well, I like conducting. Let's take a couple of conducting classes, and I felt very comfortable in the medium, and for the first time, it wasn't scary. And maybe it wasn't scary because I already, like, comparing to voice was very scary because I was very comfortable. It was too easy, and conducting, it's not that it was easy, but I felt very comfortable, and it just made sense in violin, because being a late bloomer, it has been hard to play and to get a decent level and to maintain that level, right? So I already had the experience of grinding through music and working hard to it. So conducting wasn't that out of my comfort zone, and it just became. I felt very comfortable. I just felt very comfortable on the medium, on the podium, and from then on, it took off. And up until this day, I got my master's, like now 5 years ago, probably. No, yeah, 3, 4. So like recently, I got my master's in conducting, and it just feels comfortable to be a conductor.
Okay, so. So what does a typical, I know you work full-time at the university, but you also do all this music as well. So what does a typical, like, if we think pre-COVID, let's pretend it's pre-COVID or post-COVID or whatever we want to call it, what does a typical work day look like for you?
So as you mentioned, I do have a day job, a boring day job that pays the bills. and that is something that I mean, if anyone who's interested in going into music has to accept the fact that it's very unlikely that you're going to have the backup of an institution with a a salary and and go to work and finish at 5 and then go home and then watch TV. It's very unlikely that anyone will have that. Some people are lucky and that's awesome. And I wouldn't say lucky. They just know how to, or the path deal goes that way. For many of us, you will have a bunch of source of income everywhere and little projects, and some projects will fail and some projects will you won't make any revenue, or you will break even or whatever, and some projects will work out fantastically. For me, I still have to do a full-time day job to pay the bills, and then after that I either go to one of my orchestras with the university, or RCO, community orchestra, and then on if I'm not in the orchestra, if I'm not on the podium or in the orchestra playing, I am teaching.
Okay.
And yeah, I teach private violin lessons, which is another source of income. And if not, then I have a partnership with Virtual Sheet Music, and I teach conducting through them as well. So I do free videos and as well as video lessons in there, and that's another source of income as well. And then if I'm not teaching or conducting or playing, then I am recording instructional videos for Virtual Sheet Music. And through the pandemic now, it has been instructional videos for everybody, because yeah.
So you are very busy. You're a very busy person.
Yeah.
And I will say that is, as I've talked to various musicians, because you're right, like most musicians do not have a full-time 9 to 5, 8 to 5 kind of a job. They're pulling a little bit of income from here and a little bit of income from here, and this and this and this, and so many musicians live a very busy life.
Yeah.
Because that's the nature of the business, I guess I'm going to say. So yeah, so clearly you have a drive. Like if you wouldn't do it if you didn't love it. Is that correct? Is that inaccurate? Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? It feels so weird. Like I remember every time, like by April, May, everybody is like the season, because here in the city at least, the musician season starts to it picks up in December and then dies down a little bit, and then it picks up in March, April, May, and then dies down a little bit. And then after the last push in the spring, then you have no projects, you don't have anything, unless you're already pre-committed to something. There is nothing going on, and it feels so weird when you just go home and you have nothing to do. I'm like, okay, why do I don't watch TV, and so I'm like, okay, what do I do now with my time? I read and but even then I feel antsy. I feel like I'm forgetting something. There is something, and I'm not forgetting anything. It's just it feels weird that you're used to that pace all the time.
Interesting. So okay, so how did I don't know how to ask this question. Let me just so are there things you know about being a musician now that you wish you'd known, like when you first went to your dad and say, I want to buy this violin? Are there things about being a musician now that you wish you'd known then?
Where do I begin? It's I was younger, and but I was envisioning myself as as like this famous soloist, and like typical. I am pretty sure everybody goes through that, and I wish I had accepted that it's okay to know that the path is not going to go that way. and then you can have a productive, full, happy professional life in other ways, right? I couldn't see myself not performing. I couldn't see myself currently right now. I'm pretty sure it will change if something, if something in my life changes, I could adapt. But I could not see myself not performing. But in whatever ways you're performing, it's okay. It doesn't matter if you're, if you end up as a soloist, or if you end up as a group musician in a band, or in a choir or whatever. As long as you're doing something, and you do your best at that, doing something, it's okay. And I wish I had known that, so that I didn't, like, during my student years, because of that, because same thing, late bloomer and all that kind of stuff. There was a lot of pressure to, like, even from my violin teachers, like, okay, you need to know all this repertoire that you didn't learn, so hurry up and catch up, and how you do it, you figure it out. And there was a lot of pressure, right? And they were great at teaching me, but it's like, it's very different to teach an adult who is eager, and to teach a kid who, like, has all the time in the world, right? And yeah, I wish I known that, it's okay if you do something. It's okay if you go to voice, and it's okay if it is easy, because and if you lose your voice, well, maybe become a choir conductor. And then, right? And now I'm an orchestral conductor or an instrumental conductor. That's okay. And the little things like that, I wish I had known, so that the stress wasn't that focused on one single thing, right? Like, I could have diversified my studies, and go from there.
So I wonder though, because I've had a couple of conversations with people around the school piece. Like, we do a lot with our students, like, the way we train our students is to almost get them, like, to push, right? Like, you have to achieve, like, you have to get to the next level, you get to the next level, and I'm not sure where that comes from, but it tends to happen in the school system, right? Like, you're getting graded on what you play in order to get your marks, in order to get your degree, right? And so we do that. And so we almost build that into, we've almost built it into the system. Whereas you're not the first person to have said, it's okay what you're doing. Like, you don't have to be Yo-Yo Ma plays cello, I know, but you don't have to be Yo-Yo Ma in order to be successful as a musician.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's interesting. And I've had a couple of people, and I've certainly said it a lot myself. So I've said a number of times that I became a much better musician once I was done with school, because I stopped worrying about what they were going to say. Like, right? Like I can perform for people who don't have the music in front of them and aren't looking for every single wrong note, and enjoy that much more than I did maybe playing a jury back in my music degree.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, I had the same experience. Like, you could find your voice after you're done school, because the voice of your instrument is the voice of your teacher. And even if your teacher tries their best to say, no, you do you, like, you whatever you do is is your own interpretation, or whatever, whether you like it or not, their voice and their opinion goes to you, right? And it's unavoidable. I experienced that as a teacher, and, like, I have, they play something, and I have to remind myself, okay, instead of us telling them, no, that's not right, tell them, why did you do it? Why did you make that decision? And if they say, like, I don't know, like typical teenager, I don't know, then, like, okay, that means you didn't actually study. That means you're just shooting notes, right? But if they go, like, well, I like the phrasing here, I like, or even students who are not that experienced, they go, like, well, I like the way it sounds this way. If I do it the other way, it doesn't speak to me. I'm like, okay, that's okay. These are the traditional way people do it, and you kind of have to know that, because they will ask you, like, someone will ask you that. and they will probably judge you really harshly if you don't know that. But what you're doing, I have to remind myself that what they are doing, it's okay. Like, it's music. It's not. And it's going to sound horrible what I want to say, but it's music. It's not brain surgery. Like, nobody's life depends on you. If you botch a note, whatever, like, people would probably not remember that note. Some people would, but not all. Not everybody. Like, if you botch a brain surgery, that's a whole different situation, right? But it's just music. It's nothing bad is going to happen, and probably a lot of good is going to happen out of your performance. So yeah.
Interesting. That it's a very different way of looking at music, right? Because you're right. And I'll go back to the school thing again, because in school it's about accuracy, but when you're talking about it as music, then it's more about for me anyway, it's a little bit about I've talked about like expressing what I see in the music, not necessarily what someone else sees in the music. Yeah.
And there is, like, I mean, there is this other aspect of, like, when you go through school and you go, like, eventually you kind of have to justify why you did it, like, right? Like, particularly, like, when it comes to classical music, like, and very typical, they will ask you, like, I remember my master's degree, like, my defense, it was like, okay, there is this part that you did this way. Why did you do it that way? And if you say, well, it's because I like it, or because it sounds nice, that's not enough, right? Like, you have to know your background, you have to know your history, you have to know the performance history of that time, you have to know a bunch of things to arrive to that decision. But even that is subjective.
Yeah.
As you know, I'm pretty sure people will argue with about that with me, and that's totally they will probably win that argument, but it's still subjective. Like, you interpret text in a certain way, and it's fabulous, it's great. Someone else will come and interpret the text in a different way, and they will have arguments until the cows come home and never agree with a collective. I mean, when have you met two conductors that agree in the color of an orange? Like, never. Like, and if a conductor likes another conductor, that means that conductor is dead, right? So they, right, like, is that idea of, like, well, yeah, we have pathways to get to an interpretation, but it's still subjective.
Well, and I think it's also that we bring our own personalities, right? Like, we bring our own experiences and our own personalities to the interpretation of the music.
Right.
And so it becomes like, and I guess for me, that's where I say it's about the expression of how I understand or interpret the music, that it becomes, that's part of the performance, is that it's not just about doing it the way somebody else did it. And I'm curious. I heard somebody, I don't know, it was in a podcast quite a while ago, heard somebody say that, if you go back 200 years, and I say this because I've been thinking a lot about orchestras and live performance and classical music in my own job. So that's partly why this intrigues me. But anyway, they said, if you go back to it, 200 years, wouldn't have been 250, but 200 years, 100 years, if someone went to a live performance of Beethoven's symphony, it would be a symphony number, I don't know, 5, 9, whatever one. They went to a Beethoven symphony, it would be the only time in their lives they would hear that piece of music, because there's no recording, right? There's no Spotify, there's no Apple playlist, there's none of that stuff. And so in some ways, we might be exploring new ground, because we're now dealing with generations of people who have grown up with recordings of music. And so it's how, like, excuse me. In the past, you're right. Your instrument would be your teacher's voice. And so that's how that gets passed down. But now we listen to things as well as our teachers. And so it's interesting.
Right. And I mean, at that orchestra, even that orchestral argument, I remember reading something about like back then, you could distinguish orchestras depending on like there's the sound of their woodwinds, or the sound of their vibrato, or their sound of you will distinguish different orchestras, and still a little bit today, like you an European orchestra, the woodwinds will sound slightly different than the woodwinds in America, for example, right? But but that differentiation is getting more and more blurred because of that, right? Like we're so used to listening to the hits, to the classics, to the like from everywhere every time, and then and with globalization there is so much exchange in a good way, and things are getting very even like very homogeneous in terms of like how things sound and how people interpret things. Yeah.
But the other thing I was going to say, because I know we're almost at time.
Oh, no.
The other thing I was going to say is when you're talking about like, you know, you need to know why you've made a decision about doing something different than the traditional way. What I was going to say was, I don't think we would have metal and hard rock if someone had not gone around at one point and said, no, I'm going to do it this way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, okay. Let's see. Do I have any? I have lots of questions always, but I will just ask. This is my last question. Other than being able to play the violin and learning to conduct, are there other skills you needed to learn to be the musician that you are today?
Oh, plenty. I mean, the pandemic has kind of brought them up like a lot, right? But in terms of business, like, because for all intents and purposes, you're an entrepreneur. When you're a freelance musician, again, very few people have the backup of an institution, of a symphony, or an orchestra, or a university, or whatnot. So you're an entrepreneur. You're doing your own projects, and so you have to know the business side of it, even like accounting and those little things that most of us are not trained to that. Some universities and some places offer like business in music and whatnot, but it's not part of the regular training. I wish it was, or at least when I was a student, it wasn't part of the regular training. So that side of it, and a lot of extra creative skills that you need to have that are extra musical, like all the recordings that I've been having to do, right? Like either like acoustic recordings or video recordings that I've been having to do, and have to go and figure out how to edit something, and I don't have a degree in that, or I don't have, right? So I either have to take an online class, or I have to figure out on my own, and now the pandemic has brought up how that all of that is changing, and we might I don't think live performance will go away, of course, but it will just we added an extra layer of how we can deliver our program to the audiences, right? And now it's a matter of us accepting that there are better ways, because in a certain way, being an orchestral musician, a classical musician, tends to be a little bit elitist in terms of like, if you have to buy a ticket, you have to be able to go to a concert hall, probably dress in a certain way, or things like that. But take the Guyana Community Orchestra, like we go to places where they can't afford it. So, and that question has, how are you going to deliver your program to places where they don't have access? And think of things of SAS culture and Saskatchewan Orchestral Association, that is like, okay, what are we doing to the north? How are we going to deliver programming to the north, and in a way that is respectful, that is accepted, that is, you know, and all these questions. And now the pandemic has kind of brought them up and make them, okay, force your hand or twist your hand to like get on it and do it.
Yeah, it was much easier before the pandemic to say, oh no, that won't work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because now we've seen that some of it does work, and now we actually have to do some of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we're going to end it there. I'm going to say thank you very much, Adrian, for talking with me today, and I will stop the recording, and let's